Hello, I am Carolyn Lovewell, and you are listening to the Sleepover podcast. Layla has been feeling kind of introspective lately, so I'm here with my friend Frank Cafardi. Frank is one of David's, my husband's, oldest friends. You might also hear sounds from baby Solomon, and Lulu are here with us. We're hanging out on vacation in Tulum. And I've been talking to Frank about his magical practices and his general orientation towards life. And I've been thinking that in this season of Sleepover Podcast, since, like I said, Layla's experiencing a more internal-looking time, that we might have some more guests. And I was thinking Frank could be a frequent guest because he entertains me. I hope you'll find him entertaining. And well, without further ado, Frank, how would you like to introduce yourself to good people at home? Lulu, no banging noises, please. Mommy's recording a podcast.
Hello. I don't know how to introduce myself.
Tell them about you. What do you do?
I'm a steelworker.
Frank is
in the mundane sense. Yeah. That's what I do for money, so I can survive in this world. But I'm also a practitioner of Germanic left-hand path paganism. It's a hard thing to describe, I guess. A lot of my magical and spiritual practices are intuitive and not necessarily adhered to a tradition as most people would understand it.
Yeah, and how would you define, what does left-hand path mean to you?
I think that it focuses more on becoming godlike rather than showing veneration and devotion in a servile sense to a deity. Mm-hmm. Not to say there's anything wrong with that. I think that middle hand path is probably the right way to go, at least for me. I've come to that conclusion. But I focus as much as I can lately on the left-hand path because I feel like I need to act more godlike, for lack of a better specific phrasing, just for my own, personal growth.
Yeah.
Spiritual and magical growth.
That makes sense to me. So I think it was kind of interesting because David gave you this assignment to write about your highlights of life.
Frank's top 100.
Frank's top 100 I think maybe if we speak a little bit louder just because it's big in here, that would help the recording.
Okay.
But your top 100 and sort of as a means of helping you figure out what you most want to do, what you most want to build a business around because you're kind of getting tired of being a steel worker.
Yeah, it kills me a little bit every day. I go into that mill.
Yeah. Well, you said something about it seemed to be that your top moments in life all had to do with accomplishments in love or violence.
Yeah. So, I'm probably going to sound a little shaky when I talk about some of these things because they are profound moments in my life, and sometimes they bring me to tears thinking about it, just so you know.
This is another reason why I wanted to record Frank today, because Frank is having he's being deeply touched by divine moments of realization and synchronicity and crying a lot, and it's really sweet to see a big steelworker guy like Frank cry with divine inspiration. Lulu, honey, I love you so much. Could you please play with your toys just over there? Because they're kind of making a lot of noise. Okay. Thank you so much, honey. So Frank's giving out his top 100. He has 30 so far.
33.
I feel like these are just some really colorful moments of the ones I've heard, and I want to know more. So lay on some of these moments, Frank.
Let me see if I can pick a good one. Let's see.
Thank you so much, Lulu.
Well, one of them happened yesterday, actually.
Just yesterday?
Yeah. I've only ever been to the ocean once before yesterday. One time before, and it was not a very pleasant experience for me. But yesterday, I was hanging out with you guys. I was out in the water with David and Lulu, and I just felt like this overwhelming sense of you're doing the right thing. My intuition told me that I was exactly where I should be and that I should enjoy myself, and I did. And that was the first time that I actually felt a connection to the ocean, ever.
Yeah.
I always had a disdain, sort of. It's not a disdain. I don't know. A fear of the ocean. To be honest with you, I don't like things I can't see the bottom of. I don't like depths that I cannot explore myself.
Yeah.
So yesterday I was able to let go of that and just enjoy myself, and it was really good. I let the ocean sweep me up and cleaned all that bad crap out of me. It was really
Gorgeous.
Cool.
So like feeling really aligned and enjoying the ocean.
Yeah.
Cool. What are some other top Frank moments?
So there's this one where I felt particularly triumphant. I was hanging out with a few of my friends. We monthly we go to a cabin in the woods and hold our rituals, which I conduct for them. And part of the festivities is we do contests of strength and stuff like that. We fight each other, and in this particular time, my partner at the time was there, and my friends asked her what she wanted to see, and she said she wanted to see me bare knuckle fight someone. So, I agreed to it, and a friend of mine agreed to it, and we squared up. We threw a couple back and forth, and I was in the course of the fight. It wasn't that crazy, but my friend hit me in the face pretty hard, and it made me kind of mad. So I hit him with this haymaker. Like, I hooked him right in the side of the head. I hit him in the ear, and he took a knee. And we don't know what happened. Let me just preface what I'm about to say by saying that. We do not know why this happened, but he got hit in the head. He yelled, "Ah!" And he took a knee. And when his knee hit the ground, it broke somehow. It did not hit a rock. It was on soft ground. It was weird. It didn't break, but like the tendon connecting the quad to the knee snapped.
Yay.
Somehow. And my friends sort of made a myth of that situation by saying that I called up the vril from inside the earth and channeled it through my fist and broke this dude's knee with energy, which I thought was pretty cool.
Sounds like real to me.
Yeah. So that happened like last year. Around this time. It was like last January or February.
That's so intense, Frank.
Yeah.
You broke somebody's knee by punching them.
I didn't even mean to. I ruined that guy's life. He quit hanging out with us after that.
Oh, God.
I really didn't mean to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear you. I don't think you're dastardly like that. I hear that you did not mean to do that.
No.
But I guess I feel like part of that is, like coming to know your own strengths.
Yeah, definitely.
And including your mystical strength.
I honestly, I feel proud of myself for having done that in a way, but also it was a wake-up call to make sure that I'm a little more intentional and conscious with how I direct my energy, because that was purely by accident. I did not mean to do that. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, I'm sure you're making the people at home more and more curious. So what were some other top Frank moments? Let's get to know you. Lay it on us, Frank.
Well, there's a lot in there, a lot to go around.
Maybe I should select a top Frank moment.
Writing an article for my friend for his sword zine, his Eido. A friend of mine started an Eido club, school, whatever. Eido, for those of you who don't know, is it's almost like a ritualized swordsmanship art in Japanese traditions, focusing heavily on like very precise movements, drawing a sword out, cutting, and then putting it back into the sheath. It's very ritualized. I've seen.
Is that did you say? Is that like an Asian sword?
Japanese. Yeah.
Japanese.
Yeah. Iaido.
And you study European sword arts.
Yes, I am a practitioner of German longsword fencing. And I'm actually learning some Italian longsword now, too.
Yeah.
So it's a little more dynamic than the German.
Because Pittsburgh just so happens, in case you didn't know everybody, Pittsburgh happens to be the home of multiple sword schools.
I want to
say
say
5 schools committed to teaching the almost lost arts of European swordplay.
Not just swordplay, but also unarmed, like ringen is the German word for wrestling, and they teach that at Broken Plow, which is the biggest school in the city that I know of.
Now, do you think that every major city has that many European sword schools, or is Pittsburgh unique in some regard?
I mean, I feel like HEMA clubs definitely spring up around each other. You know, one begets another, and so on and so forth.
What's a HEMA club?
HEMA is an acronym that stands for Historical European Martial Arts.
Oh.
So it's like a dojo or whatever. You know, it's HEMA clubs are interesting because you can find a wide variety of different people who are there for different reasons. Mm-hmm. I go there because it is an imperative for me to be able to defend that which I am supposed to defend. Mm-hmm. You know, as a man, it's my job to protect and provide. So that's one of the, I mean, I've done Muay Thai, I've done Jiu-Jitsu, I've done mixed martial arts.
But swords really make your soul sing.
Yeah, when I hold a sword, I feel like an ideal version of myself. And I cannot ignore that. So I've chosen to develop it.
Oh, yeah.
And a friend of mine who is another, sword nerd like myself, he started this Iaido club and started publicizing a zine for it. And he asked me to write an article for that zine. Didn't really give me a prompt other than do whatever you feel is right to do. And I certainly, when I sat down and actually decided to write something, this is again, accidentally got into a state. I got into a flow state, and I wrote this article. I don't even know how long it is. It's not that long. It's only a few paragraphs, but I wrote it in like 30 minutes and sent it to my friend, and he said, "This is perfect, thank you." And I felt pretty proud of myself
Was
for
that the paragraphs that I read?
Yeah, the ideal swordsman.
Yeah, it was so beautiful.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so you told me that you have spent a lot of time meditating with the sword and meditating on the sword.
Yeah, and honestly, that article sums up a lot of my feelings on the sword and its use as a energetic and magical focus, a very potent one. Any person can see a sword and connect with like the thought forms that everyone looks at a sword and sees pretty much the same thing and feels pretty much the same thing, depending on whether or not you're holding it or if it's being pointed at you, I guess.
Well, tell me a little bit about how you see how your understanding of the sword as a magical weapon.
I mean, it's pretty apparent just in the symbolism. You can look around and see there's an entire suit of tarot cards dedicated to the sword, and that whole. It's funny because the sword is.
The sword is quieter with your cauldron, please. Okay, thank you.
The sword is air.
Yeah.
The element of air, and one of the things that I've learned in my sword school, at least, is that the sound that a sword makes a big difference as to how good of a sword it is. Apparently, if you have good sword wind, they call it.
You keep talking, Frank. I'm just putting Ludo outside.
Yep.
How about you play out here with your voice?
I suppose it seems a little silly, but actually listening for correct sounding sword wind is how you know your edge alignment is good, and you'll actually cut when you swing.
Woo! See, I had no idea. I mean, I knew that the swords were associated with air and like thinkingness in the tarot, but this is not. This is like a very direct thing. Listening to the wind,
sound that it makes.
Sound.
Yeah. They call it sword wind. At least
Swordwind.
we call it Swordwind.
That's a cool name.
If the sword's got good sounding Swordwind, then it's a good sword.
I never knew that. I have no idea about Swordwind.
It's sort of tongue in cheek in a way. The way we it's like, oh yeah, that's the only important thing that makes a sword good. No, it's not. But it actually is a training artifact. It helps you, make sure that when you swing, you are actually cutting with the edge and you're not going to pancake, hit with the flat of the blade.
Yeah, well, something I often consider when thinking about swords, just from what I know with tarot, is that there's only 2 sword cards that are considered positive, right? Like the Ace of Swords and the Six of Swords, and pretty much every other sword card is some kind of trouble.
Yeah.
Because the swords representing the mind and thoughts, that's what gets us into trouble a lot.
Well, so does being intelligent.
It sure does. Lordy
It's
Lord.
gotten me in trouble my whole life. But it's when you want to talk about the mental aspect of swordplay, if you want to talk about that, it's much more like a chess game than a boxing match would be. I mean, it's once you learn how all the pieces work and how they interact with your opponent and their pieces, it becomes a lot more like a game of strategy than just a fight. You're not just chopping. You're more like a surgeon than, I don't know, a guy with a shotgun. I don't know.
Yeah, the surgical dimension, the separating, discerning kind of.
Yeah. It's and one of the things that I've always loved and respected about combat arts, but also including the sword, is to me it's always been one of the most clear forms of communication between two people. There is a definitive winner and loser to that argument, and when you are in a situation like that, when you can. You're standing across from a person and you know that in order to end this situation, they have to be on their ass.
Yeah.
It brings something out of you and something out of them. You learn more about that person in a fight than you ever could in a conversation.
Makes sense to me.
It's different. It's just a different form of communication. I think that fighting, especially wrestling actually, is one of the oldest, even pre-linguistic forms of communication. My love language is touch. So I love every opponent.
Sometimes you just love them so hard, they're black and blue.
Yeah.
Well, so something I'm curious about, Frank, because obviously you're best friends with David, and David is super into magic, and you guys have been friends for how many years now?
We met in...
When you were 20 or 19?
We met in 2007 or something.
Okay, so approaching 20 years.
Yeah.
Getting up there. And so David's always, David started getting into magic around that time.
I love to tell people that I'm the reason why.
Oh, please, regale the listeners.
He would never admit it.
He never would.
He would never admit it. But when I first met him, we were in our early 20s. He might not even have been 20 by then. And he lived in a house with a bunch of his friends, who I'm still friends with as well, and he is too, most of them. And so at the time, I was on a kick. I used to go to Walmart, steal DVDs, and burn videos into them. Specifically, Zeitgeist, Esoteric Agenda, Chimatica, those weird videos that served mostly as a springboard into more, esoteric depths, metaphysical depths. And
So you would find those on YouTube? And
I would pirate them anywhere I could. Okay. So, the Pirate Bay somewhere, I would download the torrent and then I would put them on DVDs that I stole from Walmart and pass them out to people. Just anyone that I...
So you were like a magical pollinator.
I tried. I did try.
You were evangelizing.
I was trying. Well, I wasn't proselytizing people necessarily,
but you were but this is cool, check this out.
I would talk to a person, get a feel for them for a minute, and then decide, you know what, I got a couple of these in my bag.
Now
Here,
I'm
take
curious. So what got you to that point where you were interested in films like that?
Well, when I was even younger, in my early teens, I found Zeitgeist. I don't remember, a friend of mine that I grew up with in the neighborhood that I grew up in showed it to me.
That one?
Zeitgeist?
That one. I've seen the other ones you mentioned, but I didn't think I've seen that one.
Zeitgeist is an interesting thing because a lot of it's spurious, a lot of it's probably just outright wrong. It's not correct information, but I found it to be a very valuable tool for just like getting into the mindset of like, you know, seeing through the veil that's put in front of everyone's eyes by modernity, you know, that this is all you have, this material nonsense, this mundane world is your highest aspiration. And I think that while the information might not have been entirely accurate, what it did do was it spurred me to look into everything myself.
It was provocative.
Very provocative, yes. And I have always been I've tried to be a provocative person because I think that yields the best results in interactions.
I think you succeed, Frank.
Yeah. But these videos, you know, I saw them and I decided everybody needs to know this stuff. At least everyone needs to be exposed to it. So I went and stole these DVDs and I burned hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them.
Hundreds?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Well, you can steal a 50 or 100 stack of DVDs, you know.
True.
So, you know, like I said, this was like, you know, mid 2000s.
Yeah, no, so this is actually before, because, you know, I think about it how, like, these days everybody finds things on YouTube or Rumble or whatever, but in these days, sort of, YouTube was still just kind of beginning.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You still, like, the sharing, like, I was still making mix CDs probably at this time.
Yeah,
so
me too.
It makes sense to me that you were sharing things via DVD.
Well, I'd go to the South Side and I'd meet people at the Beehive or wherever, you know, we would all hang out. I pretty much lived down there for a while. And
for those of you who don't know, the Beehive was a great old coffee shop in Pittsburgh that was like the super center of weird slacker culture.
the confluence of punk and hippie and raver and everything, hipster, everything. Everybody went there. Everybody that was cool went there. And that was my main like hangout spot when I was a kid. When I was a teenager. I loved it.
It's weird that I never crossed paths
We
with you. I mean,
probably
I'm sure
were
met
in the
maybe.
same room before,
Yeah,
at least.
we just didn't
Yeah.
get introduced. Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh is a really small world.
Yeah. So we definitely, you know, a degree of separation at most probably. But so I would go there and I would talk to people. I just, you know, I've always been, so I'm weirdly introverted and able to be extroverted at the same time. I don't know how I do it. How do I put this? I didn't really speak for the first 5 years of my life. I had a terrible stutter and it was just more trouble than it was worth. So I was left to my own thoughts a lot. And once I learned how to make words properly, I couldn't shut up. But I got these like internal like processing skills for years before I ever was able to express anything adequately. So, I'm like a weird half and half introvert extrovert. I don't know if that's probably not a thing, but
Well, so you got interested in these films and you wanted other people to have the same provocation that you experienced.
I just wanted to see if anyone else would, you know, think the same things I thought about it, you know? Like, all of my biggest, like, I don't know, projects as far as helping people or trying to awaken people have been purely self-serving just because I want to have friends to talk to, you know?
Oh boy, do I ever know. Yeah.
So having peers is important, and I didn't at the time, so I wanted more. And that led me to David directly.
Yeah. Tell us how so.
Well, I met our mutual friend Alex Baker around the Beehive, and he invited me to his house where David lived with him on Mission Street. And I went to a party and I went in and hung out, had a beer, whatever. And I met David and started talking to him. I don't even remember much of what we spoke about, but I had those DVDs with me. And I said, hey, man, have you ever heard of this? I thought he was cool, so I said, you should check this out. And he cleared the room we were in, turned on a projector, and played the movie at the party. And we sat down and watched the whole thing. And that was it. Oh. After that, we were friends. We were hitting each other up all the time. We were talking. I cannot take full credit for his interest in the esoteric and the metaphysical and getting into magic, but I was there when it started, at the very least. I might have lit a little bit of a fire under his ass when I showed him that DVD. And, I can't even express how grateful and proud I am to have him in my life. That's another thing. Yeah, it's another one of my top moments. I'm going to put that down on the list after we're done.
Aww.
Meeting David was a big one. Yeah, so.
What about, so you and David vibed, and was he also encouraging you in your spirituality?
Oh, of course, yes. Yeah, we just, built off of each other's energy back and forth, and it always... we have our moments. We argue. We bicker like a married couple sometimes, but that comes from that level of intimate and deep knowledge of each other. You know what I mean?
And it's very easy to bicker with David. He likes to fight. He likes to pick an argument.
Oh yeah. And so do I. I can't argue with that. Yeah.
Well, so this is interesting to me because I think when I met you guys, I think maybe, I don't know, you were like 21 or something? No,
he was 21.
He was 21.
I remember the night.
When I
first met you, yep.
Because it all blurs together for me. A lot
Sophie
of the early
Bachelor's
Evolver
house, Evolver party.
Was the Midsummer Night's Dream planning party? No, it was before that?
Yeah.
It was okay.
Because that midsummer party, that was the big one, right?
Yeah.
So, no,
I
had already...
two before that.
Yeah, but they weren't that big.
No, they weren't that big, no.
But I'm pretty sure I met you when Evolver had first started and first got to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Because through Baker and, David as well, we, read Daniel Pinchbeck's stuff and got into the Evolver stuff. And then we found you guys and met you guys.
Well, I remember I met Sophie and Aaron when they did a party on Penn Avenue at the Irma Freeman Center. And
this was at someone's house.
This was at somebody's house.
Yeah, so it might have been after that.
Was it at the winter solstice party at somebody's house? I remember there was a house party in Bloomfield for the winter solstice, and Kevin May was there.
Are you sure that wasn't the in-bulk party on the day my grandfather died? Because you were there for that, too.
That was probably in-bulk party, and I remember it as winter solstice because it was cold.
It was cold, and we were all holding hands around the fire, yeah.
Yeah.
While we were chanting at that fire, my grandfather was passing into the next life.
What?
Yeah. That was a crazy night for me. Crazy, because I had to leave there. I think David gave me a ride to my grandfather's house where they had just taken his body out. And I was weirdly, high vibration. I walked in and I was like, look, I know yous are all sad, but listen, he's still here. When someone dies, what they are becomes a part of you, and it's your responsibility to carry that flame. And everybody just was like, what? Write that down. You're speaking at the eulogy tomorrow or whenever it was. You know what I mean? They're like, you need to write that down and say that at the funeral. And I said, okay, and I did. I actually think I still have it saved in my Google Docs from, 20 years ago, forever ago. But, that was a crazy night.
So this is deep. So one of the things that I was thinking about recently is we were doing our Christmas party and we were talking about things connected to that. Something that's funny to me is... you, me, and David all have Italian-American Pittsburgh heritage.
Yeah.
And when I grew up with it, I don't know, sometimes you remind me of some of my great uncles and my grandfather who had sort of similar speech patterns and all worked in the steel mills and stuff like that.
Nice.
But it's so cool to me because obviously you and David and me are super into magic. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that. I know you and David have both dived a lot into your Germanic magical heritage, and you've just started this Italian sword class.
Yeah.
And I feel like of all my ancestors, my Italian ancestors have been the most magically active for me, and I was wondering about that for you.
Listen, yeah, I get that. My Italian family was always superstitious, I would say. I mean, not that bad. I don't know if that seems to have a dirty connotation to it, and that's not what I mean. They are just very energetically minded people. My nunny, who was a devout Catholic till the day she died, wore, the malocchio, she would do the devil horns at people if they pissed her off.
Protection from the evil.
Yeah, like she taught me, she actually spanked me for throwing my toenails on the floor, not because it was dirty, but because I didn't flush them down the toilet. Somebody would steal my soul, or whatever she said. I can't remember. So that was actually that was my first exposure to magical anything, was from my Italian family members. But they, it's veiled as Catholicism now.
Well, yeah, my most direct Italian ancestors were not very magically inspiring. They were very into Steelers games, beer, and that was about it. But in my nighttime dreams, I've had the Italian Renaissance ancestors show up and talk to me.
Yeah.
And show me things about Hermeticism, and they're super cool.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, it's just like a fun connection that and I also have Germanic heritage, but I'm just not I haven't tuned into it as much as you and David have.
That's all right.
Yeah.
It's in there.
Yeah. So connecting with David was a really deep moment for you.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I owe a lot of who I am now to my interactions with him, for sure. He was always probably one of my stronger confidants growing up. Like, I say growing up, but I mean like early adulthood. Mm-hmm. Still growing up, I think. Just post technical adulthood. Yeah, it's been a hell of a ride so far.
Yeah. So I'm curious about how you would describe your efforts in the great work. So you started talking about the effort to become godlike, and whenever I hear that, I think about the Corpus Hermeticum and the famous passage that's leap beyond the corporeal. Imagine that you are infinite. Imagine that you pervade space and time. Imagine that you are very, very large and fill galaxies. Imagine that you are infinitely tiny. And it basically tells people to imagine that they have godlike powers and experiences. And then at the end, it's for if you cannot do this, what have you to do with God? Mm-hmm. If you abase yourself and say, I'm just a little worm shut up in this little mortal body, who are you even?
Yeah.
And that passage from the Corpus Hermeticum has resonated with me so much, and is the basis of the theurgical work that I've done with the pentagram rituals from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the hexagrams, everything. I guess I'm just curious about is that sort of how do you think about your work?
Well, I would like to preface my explanation of that by saying that I only have a surface level knowledge of the things you just said
about Hermeticism.
Yeah,
that hasn't been a focus.
I don't know much. I actually just heard the term theurgy defined for me by David last night for the first time. I never really considered that. However, the passage that you just said resonates with me very deeply, because my practice specifically seeks to emulate the archetypes that the gods, embody. And my version of veneration is to step into the gods' shoes and act as they would act, and think like they would think, and try to be like them to a certain point, because imitation is a sure form of flattery and failure if you don't go beyond that, if you don't make it yours. And so like I said earlier, my understanding is pretty rudimentary and instinctive about this stuff. I could probably stand to read a few more books about it. But I tried like sort of right-hand path devotional work, and it's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I definitely needed to swing from that side to the other for a while in order to find myself and really gain control of myself, which I'm still working on, obviously, punching people in the head with the Vril. I am trying to find a happy medium, what do you call it? Integration of left and right hand path that serves the highest good that I can.
Yeah, so the way that you're using the term left-hand path kind of reminds me of like the Temple of Set way of talking about it. Like, okay, maybe that doesn't ring a bell.
Oh, I know about the Temple of Set.
Okay.
That's Stephen Flower stuff.
Yeah.
I know about that a little bit.
Yeah, so exactly, like the Temple of Set, like going against the grain, against the collective
Convention,
grain, going into, seeking to become more uniquely oneself rather than seeking to dissolve into like the great Sat Chitananda or something.
Essentially, yeah. That's the thing is I don't know what that future might hold. I could be biting off more than I could chew, and I also don't care if I am. But I honestly, like I said, I should probably read a few more books about it because I've sort of just been doing things.
Well, Frank, I mean, we had a conversation this morning, and I think what you're doing is fantastic because you were relating to me like dream experiences and visionary experiences you've had.
Yeah.
That to me, I told you, I was like, well, in Thelema, we would definitely call that knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel because you're getting these communications from your larger self that are like guiding you into alignment with like what feels like your purpose, your dharma.
I've used the term higher self to describe the source of this information, and I like to think that I have a pretty good rapport with my higher self. He's looking out for me. Mm-hmm. He's 10 steps ahead of me, and he's telling me which way to go, and I really appreciate that. And I do everything I can to show that appreciation by following my instinct, doing what he said. It's pretty easy if you don't try to fight it.
Yeah, well, I know like the dream that you related earlier maybe might be something that you want to keep private because it is so beautiful and numinous, but if you felt like talking about it, I think it would be inspirational for the people listening about what that kind of dream can be.
I could do that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little crazy, it's a little weird, but whatever, so's everything. I had a dream where I was on the steps, the Pontic-Caspian steps, and I was sitting on a kurgan, a burial mound, a Scythian burial mound. And in this mound, I could feel and sense, and after a while, I could see the man who was buried there. And this is actually a real burial site in real life that I want to visit sometime. I was meditating on the bones and the spirit of the guy who was in that grave. And after a certain point, I feel like I could just like astrally see into the mound. I saw the bones. I saw he was carrying a bronze club. He had it actually like nestled in the crook of his arm, left arm. And as I was there meditating, just like taking it all in and seeing what I was seeing, there was I don't know how to put this, a spirit manifested around the bones, and it was like a ghost of the guy in the kurgan. And I reached into the ground, and the guy picked up his club and handed it to me. And when I touched the club, I felt as though I were giving myself the club and receiving it from myself. And that...
And did the guy also have your face?
Yeah.
You said at that moment?
Yes. It was me, and it felt and looked like me. And there are a lot of myths about a hero who wields a bronze club. I believe I want to say Theseus, but also I think Heracles also at some, well, Heracles definitely had a club. I don't know if it was bronze, but I got to brush up on my Greek histories. But for all we know, the real physical human being who was the source of these myths is buried in that kurgan. And I just felt this overwhelming connection, and everything, with every fiber of my being, I, thought, I'm this guy. I'm just another body that guy is inhabiting. Mm-hmm. And he literally just passed the proverbial torch to me. Yeah. And this happened like 2 months ago. This is a very recent dream.
This is recent.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you're like still really integrating it.
Yeah, I am. And one of there's the symbolism that keeps coming up in my mind when I think about that club is the Ace of Wands, and specifically in the Thoth Tarot deck, because it's like a burning, like, golden club, and that's what this guy handed me. And it's it has, I think it's had a profound effect on my desire to build things and make things, because I actually have started going through the process of getting together a bronze casting situation so I can just make myself a copy of that exact club, because they dug it up. This is a place where someone, excavated this stuff, and they have like specific dimensions, measurements of the club that I can recreate, and I'm going to do that. It's going to be part of my work in that area. So, you have the sword as a wand. Well, that's also a wand too.
Absolutely. I love that. I love, Frank, that so for the folks at home, Frank not only works in a steel mill, but he also has practiced metallurgy, melting down metals and making molds and pouring the metals in.
I have done casting. I have done silversmithing. I also basic like blacksmithing, making knives and tools and stuff like that. I'm a millwright by trade specifically, so I work with a lot of, I weld, I work with a cutting torch every day. I work with a lot of molten metal, just in general, in my life. So there's, Vulcanos energy there for me. Vulcanos is the reconstructed name for the Indo-European pre-Vulcan deity, the forge deity. And I think that Vulcanos is an especially powerful thing because bronze was such a powerful, spiritual thing for those people. It was always found in the graves of the most elite, whatever, magical practitioners, kings, rulers of the Scythians and their, predecessors. Bronze was a big deal, and being able to work bronze, I believe, through my own intuition, was a inherently magical process for them.
Yeah. And so remind me what bronze contains. Is it copper and iron?
Copper, tin, and sometimes arsenic.
Copper, tin, and arsenic.
Yeah.
And it was like a much harder, more resilient metal than they previously had.
Well, people went from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age pretty quick as far as humanity's progression is concerned. I don't think it was that long at all. The Chalcolithic period, I want to say, is where they made stuff out of copper, and then they realized that, well, I'm pretty sure that copper and tin are often found in deposits together, so they would just melt those chunks of rock, and it turned into bronze. And I can only imagine it was probably a secret thing that only certain people were initiated into learning, and I've done my own meditations on that whole thing too, and it's direct will work. You are taking mundane materials and turning them into something you can change the world with, a sword.
Beautifully and elegantly said. Yeah. And that's really, as far as I understand, the metallurgy is really like the relationship of shamanism and metallurgy gradually morphed into what became alchemy in like later periods.
Yeah,
like
it's
Renaissance and
yeah. I mean, I'm not as well versed in the knowledge of Renaissance alchemy, although it is really cool. I've been around enough people who are that I've picked up some things, but yeah, no, that's definitely an evolution of that. Absolutely. I mean, I could not think of it any other way.
yeah.
You know?
Well, it's so fascinating. Well, what I love about the dream that you just shared too is that it reminds me of a famous dream that Carl Jung wrote about. So Jung wrote about, I think he said he saw a yogi meditating in a Swiss, a rural Swiss church, and the yogi was meditating in front of an altar. And Jung looked at this yogi and had this feeling like, oh, this is the yogi who is meditating. He's dreaming me. He's meditating me into existence. And the yogi turned around and looked at him and had his own face. And
Wow.
so, that's...
That just gave me chills. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and your dream gave me chills because that's the same thing, except for you, yours wasn't a yogi in a Swiss church. It was a...
Dead guy in a burial mound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A dead, possibly legendary hero.
They've never found another person with anything like what that guy was buried with.
Yeah.
He was the big badass with the bronze club back in the day.
So for those folks at home who are listening, I'm curious, what advice would you give them for being able to access such a deep dream themselves, for connecting with their higher selves? Where would you tell them to start?
Oh man. It would behoove anyone to understand, obviously, to understand themselves as best they can, understand their own limits and their own strengths. And see, that's the thing, is I don't know. You just got to do it. You just have to.
Well, what were some steps that you took that brought you to the place where you were able to, so apparently you've been working in a deep way with the magic of your ancestors and martial combat arts that really appeal to you?
Well, that's just all been stuff that I've followed my gut feelings on, you know, like I was, years ago I was searching for some kind of spiritual outlet for all of this knowledge that's been imparted to me just in my solo practices. And I found a group of people who were like-minded and wanted to do the same things. And I went and worked with them, and we developed rituals together, and we do them. And during my rituals, I will recite, Odin's words from the Havamal in Old Norse, and I will stand there with a spear and a noose above my head. And, I am in that moment the idol of Odin at our ritual site. And I think that's me stepping into the god's shoes. That's me working towards apotheosis. And I attribute a lot of my growth to that, to doing the right actions and harmonizing with my higher self in that way. So, honestly, if I were going to give anyone advice, I would say if you believe in a divinity, if you believe in a higher power, you really need to stop and think I hate the old cliche, what would Jesus do? It's kind of, that's what it is though.
Yeah, but you could make it into what would Odin
whoever
do?
Whoever you want. Yeah. No, it's, whatever calls you the most, you can pay your respects in whatever way you choose, but when you start to think like a god and act like a god, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. So that's my best advice, is follow your gut and do what will put you in the most holy position you can be in, and seek the highest good that you can for yourself and everyone around you.
Yes. So beautifully said. Well, everybody, I feel like I'm happy you've gotten a chance to meet Frank, and hopefully while we're down in Tulum, we'll have some more conversations. We'll record them for you. We'll really get our third season of the Sleepover podcast rolling here. I know it's been a long lull. We haven't recorded since November. And you guys are so sweet and so patient and waited to hear and are listening to this episode. Thank you so much. We love you. Please do like and subscribe and leave a little comment that helps us with all the algorithms. Tell your friends to check out the Sleepover podcast. We're about to start the next round of Sleepover Mystery School in February in Miami. So we have that to look forward to. Hopefully Layla's down here on vacation with us too, so I think I'll be able to get her into talking soon. And have a wonderful whatever the rest of your day or evening, everybody. Whoops, little cough, bless you, little cough. All right, thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, bye-bye.